Hello, good to see you. Pastor Sam with a reflection on cursing, swearing, and foul language. I've got my handy little sheet here to hopefully keep me a little bit on track. But just talking a little bit about our language and the words that we say, and especially some of the more emotion-laden words that we might say. And not necessarily, I'm not necessarily trying to delineate right versus wrong. I may sort of venture near to those territories throughout the course of this, but mostly just looking at what are the different ways that we use our words and what are maybe some potential problems with the uses of those words. So I hope that over the course of this, you reflect upon your own use of language and whether it may be helpful or hurtful to yourself or to other people. I don't know if I'm going to have necessarily any recommendations or anything, but hope that you'll come with me on this journey as we look at the gift of speech and how we can use that gift well or poorly. Now, I've got, so what kind of prompted this is, and I'll talk more about it later on in the reflection, I had been watching two shows kind of over the recent past. And within those two shows, one of them had a particular episode with a bad word that for us is a nonsense word. The word is blort, right? B-L-O-R-T. Now that's a nonsense word. It has absolutely no meaning for us. But what really piqued my interest is that within the context of the show, that was kind of classified as one of those four-letter cuss words, right? And so the dad figure was trying to stop his son from using this made-up nonsensical word. And what intrigued me is what that word had no baggage for us. That word had nothing associated with it, right? I could say that word left, right, and center, and you might think I'm a little bit weird, but you wouldn't think really anything of it. Yet within the show, that word carried such negative connotations that the dad was trying to stop his kid from doing it. The other show that I watched, the people were in kind of an afterlife-esque thing, and they were unable to use foul language. And so what would happen is they would try to say something foul, and it would automatically be changed a little bit. And so I'm going to get to those two examples a little bit later on, talk about them more in depth, because I first want to talk about just different emotionally laden uses of our language. And I'm trying to make up or use terms that don't already have things attached with them. Because I'm going to talk about, the second thing I'm going to talk about is swearing. And by that I don't mean the F word or the D word or any of the words. I mean swearing an oath. So we have, even in the context of having this discussion, it's a little bit difficult because we have taken some of these words and used them to mean things that they don't necessarily mean in their most straightforward use. So some of it is just looking at what in the world does this mean, and especially kind of within the context of God's word as well. We'll be starting there for the first half and then sort of departing and looking at cultural associations with certain words, which I'm calling foul language. Okay, so first we're going to talk about cursing, swearing, and then sort of with that using God's name in vain, and then last, foul language. Cursing is up first, and by cursing, I would say, now I'm going to use the language here, and I hope that you will allow me to use it. I mean to analyze it. And so I don't mean to bring the connotations with it. Maybe I'll regret that later, but at least for now, I'm fairly confident that I want to use it. So cursing is tied to, I would say, damnation. And we would express this in the phrase, God damn it. Right? Maybe something that you've said, maybe something that you've heard over the course of your life. And the idea is we want God to use his power in some way. We're calling down a curse upon another person, upon an object, upon ourselves, upon a situation, upon whatever. And I would say the problem is this desire to have God do something. And usually it's, again, an emotionally laden situation. You do something that you regret, and so you say that. Or you do, or you're with somebody and they're just so frustrating that you say it. Or, very, very cliche, right? You're swinging a hammer and you miss and you hit yourself, and so you say it, right? You hurt yourself in some way. And I doubt that we realize exactly what it is we're asking God to do. We are asking God to send the object, the person, the situation, which doesn't even make any sense, to hell. We want God to damn this person or this thing or this whatever to an eternity in hell. And I doubt very much in our most conscientious and aware moments, I doubt that we would want that for anything or any person or whatever. Right? We would never desire that anyone or anything should go to hell and should spend an eternity apart from God. And so the use of cursing is something that we say, and maybe we feel it in that exact moment. But again, if we're able to step away from the moment and gain some space and some time and some emotional distance, when we reflect upon the moment, we probably do not carry such strong of feelings. And maybe we don't like the person or the thing or whatever, or we don't like what happened, but there are other ways for us to express that desire than for God to send that thing or that person to hell eternally. Like, that is a very ultimate and final, that is the worst possible thing that we could want in a situation or against a person or whatever. And so here's one of those times where I'm going to come out and say, I would say that cursing is altogether wrong, like nearly regardless. I won't say 100% of the time. I don't know if someone can contrive an example where it may be appropriate, right? But I'll say like 99.9% of the time, cursing is unwarranted. The desire for God to damn something to hell is, first of all, not a judgment call that we get to make. It's one that Jesus will make on Judgment Day. And so part of it is this desire for God to do something, but then for us to appropriate a task and an action that Jesus Christ himself will do later. So for us to take something from Jesus, for us to have the audacity that we are able to make a judgment call that Christ himself will make someday, kind of leads us to, we should probably not be doing this. Right? I would say cursing, the desire for God to damn a thing, is like altogether uncalled for. That there is no situation where, or very nearly no situation where we should ever take this responsibility upon ourselves and desire for God to damn a thing. So cursing, one of the perhaps simpler ones, just don't do it, right? Don't do it. Now I think I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'll stick to the order I have. So cursing, swearing. And now when I say swearing, you probably are conjuring up images of 3 and 4 letter words, right? And that's not what God means when he uses the word swear. That's what we today mean, and that's kind of where I'm going to go in the second half, is we as a people have placed certain baggage upon words. And what exactly that means as far as our language and its helpfulness or harming effect upon people. But swearing, like when Jesus talks in the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, do not swear at all. He's not saying don't use, In that particular instance, he is not talking about whether or not we should use four-letter words. He's talking about us saying something and then us wanting to intensify it. And this would be kind of more similar to, like, do you swear on your mother's grave, right? Or do you swear by, we don't really do this anymore today. We do have people swear in court when they go up to the witness stand. At least I think they still do this. I mean, I've only ever seen TV shows where you put your hand, and this is what's making me question it. You put your hand on the Bible and you say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And the person will say, yes, I do, or I swear, or whatever. That's about the only instance where we today as a people encounter swearing in the same way that God talks about swearing. And that is the singular instance that we need to bring to our mind at this point in the reflection. Swearing, and especially as Jesus talks about it in the Sermon on the Mount, swearing is saying something and then wanting people to believe you firmly, so you'll swear. Like, I swear by, and Jesus gives some examples. I swear by heaven, or I swear by earth, or I swear by Jerusalem, or I swear to God, right? And maybe we use that, again, kind of flippantly and without realizing what we mean. And Jesus is like, don't do that. No cause for that whatsoever. And what he says is, I'm going to hopefully recall and slightly paraphrase, do not swear by heaven, for it is God's throne. Do not swear by earth, for it is his footstool. Do not swear by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. That was a pretty close paraphrase. Instead, let what you say be simply yes or no. Yes or no, right? Jesus says, just say a thing and don't feel like you have this desire to intensify what you're saying, because you don't own or have any control over those things. So if I swear to God, I don't have any control over God, right? God actually has control over me. God, ironically, and I don't quite mean this, God could swear to me, right? Now, he would never need to do that, but that's just hopefully a slightly humorous example. God could say, I swear to Sam, because God has control over Sam. He can do whatever he wants with my life and with me. But I couldn't swear to God because I have no control over God. I couldn't swear by a city or a thing or whatever because I don't have any control over that, right? I couldn't even swear by my head because I can't get myself more hair or change the color of the hair that I do have. And Jesus says, just say yes or no. Just say the thing, and either people believe you or they don't, right? And then you kind of have to let the thing lie. We should not feel this need to intensify what we say or to make people need to believe us more firmly than if we say, I saw a thing or I did a thing or whatever. Swearing, again, kind of altogether, I would say unnecessary, right? Swearing in the, I swear to God kind of thing. Now, both of these, cursing and swearing, sort of related to using God's name in vain. And God has come out and said, don't do that. So that's another very clear one. Second commandment, don't use God's name in vain. He said to not do that. And both cursing and swearing sort of run very closely to the second commandment about not using God's name in vain. And the idea is kind of twofold in there. First of all, we have no authority or control over God. So if we're using his name to do something or to cause people to believe something, we have no business taking God's name and using it for our own actions. We have no business doing that whatsoever. And the second one is that God wants us to use his name in a very certain list of conditions. When we're praying, when we're praising, when we're talking about him, and hopefully in a positive way, right? Those are the times when we can use God's name. God's name and his his being, his person, his essence are intricately tied together. When God establishes the temple in Jerusalem, a little bit of kind of Old Testament history / trivia. When God establishes the temple, he says, I will cause my name to dwell there. And by that, he also means that he himself, in some mystical God way, will also dwell there. When his name goes to a place, he himself goes to that place. Which, if I can rabbit trail a little bit, baptism becomes so very important because God puts his name upon us. And it's not just the fact that God's name is there. Because God's name is there, God himself is there. We say that the Holy Spirit resides within us, and that's true. God's name and his person or his being are intricately tied together. So if we're using God's name poorly, we're using God's person, and I realize he's not a person. We're using God's person poorly. We can't separate, oh, I was just talking about him. No, you're like kind of trying to drag God down. Cursing and swearing both run very, very closely to using God's name in vain. So those are a little more clear. Like, don't be cursing, don't be swearing. God has said, don't be using his name in vain. Okay, halfway done. I want to talk next about foul language. Words that we say. And by this I mean, and I kind of want to explore a little bit, just explore for myself and hopefully for your sake as well. Words that hurt other people, words that hurt ourselves or the situation, words that are considered foul, right? That you may say when you've been out drinking with friends, but that you probably would not say when you're talking with me in church, right? And that's kind of the group of words that I want to talk about. And getting back to what I said earlier on. So there's these two TV shows that I had been watching. And again, I kind of went into a little depth about the one. So in the one show, the son learns about this new foul word, blort, right? B-L-O-R-T, which for us is a nonsense word. The word blort has no meaning whatsoever. I could say that and you would have no idea what I mean by that word. But what really interested me is that, again, like I said, within the show, this was like the worst possible foul word that anyone could ever use. And so the dad was trying all of these ways to stop his son from using that word when, if we step into our reality, he could have used that word all he wanted because none of us know what he means by that word. And that's what interested me in the subject so much, the idea that we are, and here's kind of the question behind the question. Do we give power to these certain words? And then sort of why and how do we give them power? And if we're the ones who give them power, then what are maybe the helpful, hurtful boundaries of its usage? And is there a world in which we can remove the baggage of these words? And blort was just so kind of earth-shaking to me. Okay, here's this word that within the culture of this show has this negative connotation, but for us is a meaningless word. And the foul language that we use today, can that operate in the same way? Just because we have, insert foul word here, is that word itself bad or wrong or foul? And I sort of came to the conclusion, no. The word in itself is not a bad word. We, as a people, as a society, as whatever, have attached negative baggage to that word. And that's what interested me so much in the blort. right? Because we as a people have attached no baggage to the word blort. I say that, and the more I'm saying it, I sound more and more ridiculous. But if I start saying some of those words that we have attached negative baggage to, you may even stop watching this, right? Depending on how strongly you are offended by those words. And that's sort of the point that I want to explore, is why have we given those words such power? And not necessarily trying to answer, is there a way to remove that power? But just looking at, since we seem to be the ones who have given these particular words power over us, this is no longer a matter of God saying use it or not. This is a matter of we together as a society, are we helping or hurting other people? And that's kind of where I'm going with this. In our use of foul language, what is the result? Because God does talk a little bit about, in a more general way, harming other people, and especially St. Paul. And this is kind of why I'm doing this during the Romans devotion. Paul is going to talk, I think it's even in chapter 12, about, hey, if you're doing a thing and it's hurting other people, that thing might be fine on its own, but if it's hurting someone, you got to stop doing that thing. Or at least, and this is one of his points, or at least stop doing it with them. And so I'm sort of anticipating Romans chapter 12 in this video, and I'm kind of tipping where I'm going with that. So let's talk about a couple of, let's kind of talk about the context in which we might use those words, right? So think about some of the examples that I gave before. You're hammering and you hit your thumb with the hammer, and so you say a foul word. Or you feel very strongly, usually against an idea or a person or a group of people or whatever, and so you use foul language to express the degree to which you dislike them. So we've got kind of anger / frustration. We've got a gauge of dislike. Maybe we've got jealousy too. You're jealous of another person because of what they have or who they are or what they're able to do. And so you're talking about this other person and you use foul language, again, to kind of express your jealousy. The words are a vehicle, a tool, a way to express what are hurtful thoughts and feelings. You could, now, and here's kind of what keeps me thinking about this. You could just as well say, I really hate so-and-so. I think they're, and then list all of these negative qualities. And that would be just as harmful as if you say, you know, that insert foul language here person. It's kind of a way for us to shorthand the expression of all of these negative things. And if you're talking about someone, I would say going on in great lengths about just how terrible a person they are versus using foul language about them are probably maybe not exactly equally hurtful, but very nearly equally hurtful. The foul language is a way for us to kind of shorthand expressions of anger, expressions of jealousy, expressions of frustration. And we use those particular words because we as a society have already attached negative baggage to those words, right? The power of foul language is that it's foul. And I keep coming back to the word blort, which in the context of the show is foul language, but for us is a meaningless word. So kind of why is this language foul? Well, it's foul because it's foul, which is sort of a dumb answer, but it's the only answer we have, right? It's a bad word. No, I should say it's a foul, because I said before that they're not bad in themselves. It's a foul word because it's foul. Well, why is it foul? I don't know. It's a foul word. Is there a world in which it stops being foul? I mean, potentially. If we have given this baggage to pick a particular word, there is a world in which, throughout the course of time, that baggage gets attached to a different word. And the word that we had attached it to initially loses that baggage. That's kind of the morphing usage of words over time, and how words can change what they mean. When you say a word, if you said a word 100 years ago, people would you can think of a situation in which, having used a word 100 years ago, people would react differently to saying that word now, and people react. And so you think 100 years in the future, is that word going to be disarmed of the baggage? It certainly could be, right? However, we live now, here today. We don't live 100 years in the past. We don't live 100 years in the future. And so that language, the foul language, is hurtful to other people, hurtful to, potentially hurtful to objects, which is kind of where I want to go next. So talking badly against another person, whether it's to their face or not, like, not appropriate. Even using, and this is where Romans 12 is going to go, even sort of, let's call them neutral things, when they become hurtful to another person, are then themselves hurtful. And so some of it is assessing the situation and the people you're with, and whether this, let's call it a neutral thing, might be helpful or hurtful in the situation. And I kind of want to put foul language in this category as well. The words that we have are not in themselves bad. We as a people have attached negative things to them. And if I said one of those foul language words, you would conjure up the baggage that we have attached. But if I say the word blort, again, you think I'm crazy. But you're not offended by it, at least unless you've seen that show and you hold very strongly to the universe presented in that show. You're not offended by it. So that's kind of what I mean. Like, we have equipped these words with their harming power. But since we have equipped them with harming power, let's not use them to harm other people. Now, there's sort of a somewhat specific case that I want to talk about as well, and that would be, so using foul language against a person, pretty much inappropriate. What about using foul language against an object? And by this, I don't mean you're cursing it. I don't mean you're taking God's name in vain. I don't mean you're swearing by it. I mean you're using these words, these foul words, against an object. And I would even say you're by yourself, right? Because if you're with other people and you're using foul language, again, you may be hurting the other people, even though you're not talking to them. Just the use of the fact that you are using foul language may be a hurtful event to them. I gotta take this phone call. Okay, but if you're by yourself, who are you hurting in that situation? Well, potentially yourself. And I guess what I'm just trying to do is justify using foul language when I'm by myself. Maybe that's been the point of the whole video all along. What hurtfulness is occurring if I by myself am using foul language? And I don't know if there is any. And maybe that's one of those things that we have to answer for ourselves. If you are by yourself and you use foul language, have you hurt yourself by its use? If you have hurt even yourself by the use of foul language, then by all means don't use it. If I'm by myself, I feel like I can say a foul word and not hurt myself by it. And in that case, I would say that it is a neutral thing. The word in itself is not bad. the word has had this negative baggage attached to it, I use the word by myself against that stinking nail that I wanted to hit. I have hurt that nail, which is an inanimate object. And so think about, now I suppose you could argue I am making myself the type of person who uses foul language, but I would also argue I am making myself the type of person who assesses the situation and who looks at my actions in light of what hurt or help might they be, which is exactly the type of person Paul wants us to be in Romans chapter 12. So foul language is definitely at least a less clear one. Now again, not saying to use it freely in every situation, not saying not to use it freely and in every situation, but that this one is going to vary from one individual to the other. How strongly has that baggage been attached to those particular words? And maybe there are certain words where the baggage has been affixed so strongly that even you saying it, if you're by yourself, hurts yourself. And in which case there is harm being done to an individual, harm being done to you. And maybe there isn't, right? Maybe we could call them lesser foul language and greater foul language or whatever, right? But look at when and if foul language is spoken, what is the situation? And what is the harm versus what is the help that could be done in that situation? And that's sort of where we're going to go as we head back to the book of Romans and to chapter 12 is, hey, not just foul language, but a whole host of, let's call them neutral things. Things that are not necessarily good or bad, right or wrong, but depending upon the situation, may be detrimental to another person, right? And if they should be detrimental to another person, St. Paul is going to encourage us to not do them, at least with that other person in that particular situation. So foul language is quite a bit less clear, right? And will take some just stock of yourself, some assessment of the situation, and potentially even over time, right? So think about me saying the bad word alone. Do I, if I give myself the freedom to use foul language alone, do I find myself tending to use that foul language when it might hurt others, right? And to kind of look at it that way. If I'm using it alone, there's not necessarily visible instantaneous harm, but potentially I am harming myself because now I'm using it in a situation where it's hurting other people. So we have to be kind of cognizant of ourselves, cognizant of ourselves over time, and then the effect that we have on other people. I think that's about it. So cursing, using God, and especially in the act of damnation to send a person or a thing to hell, which he's not going to do anyway, at least not because we want it. And then swearing, kind of going along with that, taking something that we have no control over and using that to make our words seem more reliable. Using God's name in vain, all of those things, like pretty much altogether no good. Don't be doing them. And then foul language. I want to settle on it being less clear. And again, I wasn't in this to define, here are like the acceptable foul language and here are the unacceptable foul language. I don't think that's the point, that there's a list of them. But that in our living of everyday lives, are our words, are our thoughts, are our behavior helpful or hurtful to ourselves or to other people? And even those behaviors that might seem to be doing no harm could over time cause us to do harm to other people. So it's more about sort of just taking stock of yourself and who you are and what your words and habits are doing to yourself and to others, and then recognizing that the other person is always worth curbing this behavior. Like, we would not want to have a harmful effect upon another person if we can have the choice to control it. Right? We are in control of our own words and our own actions. And so those choices that we can make, we want to be helpful to other people. If you find yourself continuing to be helpful to other people, then just sort of check in with yourself every so often and see how things are going. But yeah, just some realization of our words and what they're doing and the effect that they're having upon ourselves and upon other people. So that was it. Reflecting upon these blorting words. There we go. I got to use it. And whether these blorting words are good blorting things or bad blorting things, and whether you want to be the blorting type of individual who blorts themselves all the blorting time. I think I've gotten it out of my system. Next time, we will head into Romans chapter 12. And from 12 onward, St. Paul is going to be looking at living a Christian life. So this was something of, I would not call this an introduction to the rest of the book of Romans, but at least hopefully a helpful aside to something that we likely experience fairly often, maybe we participate in with some regularity, and hopefully a helpful way for you to assess what your language may or may not be doing, and whether you might need to adjust your usage of it. Glad that you were here for this reflection, and I hope that you come back as we continue with the book of Romans. God's peace be with you, and I will see you next time.